A warm welcome to everybody today. This is our first episode of Coaching Outdoors. I'm Anna Marie and I'm in a rather damp and wintry Wiltshire in southwest England.
And I'm Alex Byrne and I'm in a rather cold and drake, as the Scottish say, Scottish Highlands in Argyll and Bute.
And we are both on a mission to encourage coaches to take their practice outdoors and also to spread the word about coaching. So coachees will be interested in working with a coach in the outdoor space. In our first episode today, we're going to introduce ourselves, share a little bit of our backstory, touch on the benefits of coaching outdoors, and ultimately set you up for the rest of the series with a little bit of insight into what's in store and who we're going to be speaking to.
So, Anna Marie, what is it that we mean by outdoor coaching, and why do you think outdoor coaching is so beneficial?
So a couple of questions thrown in there, and just to kind of really focus on the outdoor coaching bit, it kind of is what it says on the tin. Ultimately, it's coaching, and as opposed to being inside, generally sat down, confined within four walls, it's about stepping outdoors. So you're really getting that benefit of movement and nature and bringing them in to co-create the coaching conversation. So it's basically bringing a different dynamic into it. And this really kind of opens things up, and the benefits, there's so many, and where do I start? I'm sure kind of the whole movement side of things, everyone's aware of the kind of the physical benefits of that, and then there's also a lot of kind of research as well around mental health and the benefits of being outside within that. And then from a nature perspective, actually being immersed in nature, there's a lot of benefits from that, whether it is visually, whether that is from like the soundscape. And we are really keen within this series to be looking at the science, looking at the research. What does it actually prove? And we're going to be drawing from a number of different disciplines and looking at particular studies as well to really give you the data behind it, because this is ultimately what gives us the evidence. There also is a lot of anecdotal evidence as well. And Alex, I know you've done your dissertation on this when you were studying for your master's at Henley Business School, and it might just be interesting to provide a little insight into that now for our listeners, just to get a taster of it.
Absolutely, and we will be providing an overview of the dissertation that the research that I did on our website, which we'll talk a bit about later as well. But the real benefits are all around, as Anna Marie said, the ideas of movement and being physically able to change your pace as you're walking, as you're talking, either sitting still, walking, stomping, as it's been described, walking fast, walking slow, changing your pace to emphasize your feeling, your mood, etc. So there's lots of benefits, as Anna Marie said, from a movement perspective. And then there's also the elements of the nature connectedness and being surrounded by nature, natural sounds, the blue space, the green space, and how the different colours also enable us to open up parts of our brain that might not be fully firing when we're just sat inside in a room with four walls, maybe with a window or not. So it's really about engaging our brains in a different way, accessing different cognitive parts of our brain and enabling ourselves to think differently, which leads to more creativity. And from a coaching perspective, enabling people to come up with new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things, unblocking themselves from things that they might find are quite blocked when they're indoors. So there are a lot of benefits out there, and we will go into a bit more detail about those with some of the people that we speak to throughout the podcast series.
So this podcast is one of another series of projects that Alex and I have been collaborating with each other on. And I first met her at Henley Business School when I was invited to talk to some master's students about the delights of stepping outside for coaching conversations. I am very much a practitioner in this field, and it has been great to work with Alex, who is very much into crunching the data and really kind of diving into that. So we do kind of complement each other really well. And we've had this podcast dream in the pipeline for a couple of years now, and it's been bandied about, and it is finally coming into fruition. And it's been really, really interesting talking to a lot of other practitioners and experts in the field. Though ultimately, what is our drive behind this, and what are we hoping for?
So yeah, it's really about, as you said, introducing people to a different way of having coaching conversations. So and challenging that perception that coaching has to be done indoors. It has to be done either in an office or in a coffee shop or in the lobby of a hotel, or at various places where coaching tends to happen, and has been the way for many years since we started the idea of coaching. So it's really about challenging people's perceptions, and introducing them to this new way of doing coaching. And it's about encouraging people to consider taking their coaching conversations outdoors, either as a coach yourself. Think about ways in which you can adapt your practice to go outside. But also encourage potential coachees or people who are already being coached to do things differently, and find ways of being coached in a different domain, in a different context. So it's really about just sharing this way of doing things that we both love, and the other people that we're interviewing for the podcasts are all big proponents of outdoor coaching. They're people who are really keen on being outdoors themselves, and we'll touch a little bit on their backstories as well, and where they've come from and how they've ended up in the world of outdoor coaching. But it really is our dream to share our love for outdoor coaching and what we've seen as the benefits, both, as Anna Marie said, really from a very practical perspective, having done it for years herself, and also what the research is telling us, and also what research we might be able to do in the future as well around what these benefits are for both the coach and the coachee. So who is this podcast aimed at, Anna Marie? What kind of people are we aiming this at?
So predominantly we're looking for coaches who are interested in taking their practice outdoors. Maybe they need a little bit of encouragement, maybe they need a little bit more information, maybe they want to learn a little bit more about other coaches who have already been on that journey and learn from that. So it is very much, we're on this mission to make outdoor coaching just an accepted part of the coaching profession. It is a really small niche at the moment. Yes, there's been a lot of work done more within kind of the expedition space or the outdoor learning space, but this is really kind of switching up ideas around business. We very much think culturally that work takes place inside, sat down, and this has got its roots back in, going back to the 19th century when we were kind of working on the factory lines. And actually, how has work changed now? We're far more knowledge workers. We're using our brain, and actually for our brain to function optimally, we want to be getting movement in there as well. So it is very much about kind of dispelling this, ideas around work is inside. Actually, the element of creativity inspired by the movement and the nature really kind of opens things up. And, when we look at it genetically, we're not programmed to sit down for, 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, which our kind of work styles have become. So we're very much looking for coaches who are willing to kind of join us and take up the mantle and offer this kind of different way of doing things. We're also looking for coachees who might be interested in having a coaching conversation outside. A lot of my clients I speak to, when they're looking for a coach, they don't even have an awareness that this does exist. They're almost kind of, oh, well, if I'm going to work with a coach, it needs to be sat down somewhere. So this kind of really opens things up. And we're also looking, within the HR world for individuals who potentially they are thinking of introducing a coaching program into their organization, or kind of designing something and actually just offering outdoor coaching as an option, just so it then starts to kind of spread the awareness too. But it goes broader than that. Ultimately, I'm looking for people who are interested in stepping outside. It's like the ripple effect. And if we start to talk to coaches and clients, get a kind of taster of it. And what I found within my work is that I've been working as a client in the outdoor space, then actually often they'll then start to take conversations outdoors, whether that's around performance, whether that's around kind of brainstorming ideas. It's really just having that bigger kind of movement so we can all get the benefit from it. And it's not confined to the UK. We've very much, we've been connecting with coaches beyond that, into Europe. America and down under as well. So it's not kind of geographically or globally restricted. This really is something that we want to get momentum going across the whole world. So ultimately, it kind of comes back to us at the centre of it. We're going to be hosting these conversations, and it's been an absolute honour and privilege to connect with so many coaches. And what we always do during these interviews is ask them a little bit about the backstory, because we've all been on our own journey, and how do we get to where we get to. So we just love to share like a little bit about our backstory and how that has kind of shaped and molded us to get us to where we are, and why we are so passionate about the outdoors and nature. So to kick us off, Alex, it would be great just to hear a little bit about your backstory and where your kind of passion and enthusiasm for the great outdoors comes from.
Well, I'm one of those people, I think, that basically grew up free range outdoors with nature. My parents were both very keen on me and my brother and sister spending as much time outdoors as we could, and I absolutely loved it. I embraced it. I remember school holidays or weekends, my mum would open the front door or the back door and be like, out you go, and come back when it's dinner time or when you're feeling hungry. And we made our day, we revolved our day around being outdoors. I spent a lot of time climbing trees, if I remember, and probably falling out of them as well. But it was just about, I just loved being outside. I loved being in nature. I love animals as well, which really helps too. So just being able to hear bird song, being able to see wild animals around when I'm on my walks. It just really it adds an element of life to me that you just can't get indoors, and you can't get when you're sat either at your computer or sat in front of the TV. And I think I took that love for the outdoors, and when I started my coaching qualification at Henley Business School, I did a master's, which I started three years ago, pretty much to the day actually. And it was all about, for me, it was about getting that qualification, but working out how I could take my coaching practice outdoors. I knew I've been a coach for a long time. I wanted to formalize that with a qualification, but I wanted to work out how to take that practice outside. And if any of you who are listening have been to Henley Business School or the area, you know how beautiful the grounds are. So it wasn't hard to take myself outside as often as I could, and encourage people on the course to do the same. So when we had breakout sessions, I would encourage anyone I was doing a session with to come outside with me and either sit and reflect or go for a walk. So it was really about pairing the two things up, pairing my love for the outdoors with my my career choice, and my love for coaching and helping other people to resolve their challenges. And it's also a place where I go myself to reflect. So if I have a challenge and I want to do a bit of mindfulness or a bit of self-coaching, I go outside. I go and climb a mountain, or I go and sit in my garden, or I go for a walk in a woodland area. And living in the Highlands of Scotland makes that very easy, I have to say. Being able to walk out of my front door, I'm 400 feet up a mountain in my little cottage, my little mountain cottage. So I'm already on the way up. And it's just about combining those two things together. And as you mentioned at the start, I have a love for research and data as well. So my master's qualification really helped me to look at that element of outdoor coaching as well, and really realize that there really isn't that much research out there, and there really should be, and we should really start to look at that. So that our connection, Anna Marie, and our connection with Henley Business School will hopefully be ongoing with future projects around how we can do some more research into this and really share what those benefits are, so that we can encourage more and more people to take their coaching conversations outdoors. And how about you, Anna Marie? What's your backstory? It's a little different to mine. How did you get into the world of outdoor coaching?
It's a little different, though. There's definitely similar themes that kind of can be traced back, and it does very much link back to my childhood. I grew up in the northeast of England and very much spent a lot of it outdoors. My family were very much into camping and travelling, and I spent a lot of time over in the Lake District. My dad was a fell runner, and he would run up and down fells, and we would kind of generally wait for him to finish. So yeah, lots of happy memories from kind of childhood, and even being at school. I remember particularly sitting in French for some reason, Mrs. Dixon, bless her, staring out the window, watching the trees kind of rustling and being blown in the wind, and just wanting to be outdoors, waiting for the bell to ring so I could be outdoors to go and play. And similarly, kind of getting home from school and being basically outdoors. I was quite a bit of a tomboy as I grew up, and very much it was my natural environment. I felt safe outside. Whenever I was indoors, I kind of almost felt confined. And even now, whenever I go to a conference, I generally position myself so I can look out of a window. It's just that kind of sense of expansiveness and freedom and connectiveness with something bigger than me has always kind of been innate and inside of me. So when it kind of came to career choices, having had this very kind of feral upbringing, the thought of being within a corporate environment or sat down in an office really did not appeal. A lot of my friends very much wanted to be doctors or lawyers or vets or, you know, accountants, and it just didn't suit. So I ended up joining the British Army. I was in the Royal Logistic Corps for 9 years, and that very much meant I avoided an office per se for as much as possible, and also spent a lot of time outside, and, you know, great opportunity to travel and see the world. And it was actually here that I kind of cut my teeth coaching wise. I always link it back to, you know, ultimately leading my soldiers, and it was all about the people. I was there to serve them, and it was kind of came down to the conversations. And when you think about a conversation and a coaching conversation, it is very much about having that rapport, having that presence, and then asking the questions to get to know somebody, and then actively listening to the answers. So without knowing it, that is how I kind of started my coaching career. And it was only when I left and then moved into the leadership development world and had a job in the Middle East, and I had a colleague who he was a coach, and we, you know, had these lengthy conversations, that really sparked my interest and kind of kicked me onto my coaching journey. And as with any coaching journey, it is ongoing, it is constantly evolving. I would definitely say that I'm a certified learning junkie, have this kind of appetite for this, for knowledge, though at the same time I love to be out in the field, so to speak. I'm a practitioner. I love to apply the knowledge and really see the results that it makes. So I was working out in the Middle East. I got this coaching qualification, and, you know, I really wanted to dive more into coaching. So I went through the kind of the whole setting up of a business side of things, which in itself is a whole raft of different areas that you just don't really consider. Yes, you're a coach and you have that skill, but then how do you translate it into a business? And what I really was trying to do was then to fit myself into a box of being this corporate leadership coach, and, you know, be inside suited and booted, which I'd actively resisted 10 years earlier. It really didn't make sense. And I'm sure, you know, everybody I spoke to saw this disconnect. I wasn't being authentic. It wasn't me. Though it only wasn't until I kind of then slowly started piecing the bits together of, okay, so I love the outdoors. Tracing it back, you know, I'm an expedition leader. I've led expeditions all around the world with groups, and really seen the benefits of being outdoors. But then for me to kind of then mentally apply it within a business context, it took a while for me to make that connection. But once I started, you know, I haven't looked back. And for me, being outside, working with a client, walking side by side, just creating the space and having nature, whether it's just there softly in the background or whether it's more active and co-created, that is, you know, ultimately my purpose. This is what I'm here on the planet to do. And just to see the transformative effects that these conversations have upon my clients, I find it a real pleasure and a real honor. So now it's kind of, okay, looking forward, what do I want to do with this knowledge? Well, ultimately, I want more people to join me, to join us, and to benefit from it as well, which is why this kind of medium, this podcast, really just ticks all those boxes. So, you know, looking forward, yes, I've got kind of grand ideas of different coaching qualifications being taught outside. My coaching qualification was pretty much indoors, sat down. Okay, let's get it outside. I would really jump at any chance for peer conversations doing my coach training to be outside. And I think there's a lot of room for much more events, much connectivity between coaches who work within this space. We're at the beginning of this journey, and there's a lot to do. There's enough for everybody to get involved, which I think it's really important for us all to collaborate and share ideas and best practice. It's exciting.
It is, and you use the word exciting there, which is great, because I was just thinking exactly the same myself. And I was just thinking about, Anna Marie and I ran a workshop last year on blue-green coaching and eco psychology and eco coaching. And I remember afterwards a lady messaged me on LinkedIn and just said, your enthusiasm for the topic was so infectious that I'm now looking into expanding my coaching practice and taking it outdoors. And it just made me really happy, and it made me smile, because I think that's the one thing that hopefully will come across in this podcast and in future podcasts is our enthusiasm. We love the outdoors ourselves, and but we also just really want people to share in that enthusiasm for just a different way of coaching and being confident enough and also and excited enough to say, you know what, I'm gonna take my coaching conversations outdoors and give it a try. So thinking about that, keeping that in mind, Anna Marie, what are the sort of things if a coach wants to start coaching outdoors for the first time? What are the kind of practical aspects or the really important things that they need to consider before they take that first coachee outdoors?
And there is a lot of planning and preparation to be done. I always link back to my military training when my colour sergeant would say to us, prior preparation and planning prevents poor performance, and you can insert the other P out of the 7 P's there. And it very much, before you even think about the coaching, there's a lot to kind of set up from a logistical and practical basis. And just to kind of touch on a few things, we really want to be thinking about physical and psychological safety. And, you know, as soon as you step out of the confines of 4 walls, you're ultimately inviting an element of risk into the party. You don't know what is going to happen, and you need to make sure that you're preparing for that, whether that's from a weather aspect, whether that's from the terrain perspective, whether that's from other people, whether that's from animals. So you really want to be kind of working through that methodically. I don't really want to give the game away too much, because I know that some of our future guests like really dive into a lot of the details. So I'm going to keep people in suspense there, though ultimately it does come back to that planning, and then also really referencing it in the coaching agreement as well. This is like an extra dimension. This is a different form of coaching, so it really needs to be explicitly highlighted, just to make sure that you and your client really have an understanding of what you're opening yourselves into. So ultimately, that's from a coach's perspective. If you're a coachee and you're looking at, potentially working with an outdoor coach, how can you go around, hunting one out?
I think that's one of the interesting elements of this as well. It's how do we as outdoor coaches make ourselves known to potential coachees? Because I think we don't necessarily advertise ourselves in the same way as maybe as a sort of a classic business coach does. And I think that the what I would suggest is a first port of call is listen to our other podcasts in the series and really get a flavour for understanding what some of our podcast guests talk about in terms of their coaching practices, and really think about, would being outdoors suit you, and then it's a case of either contacting Anna Marie or myself through our website, which we'll give you the details for at the end of the podcast, or contacting us, contacting our podcast guests as well. They've all shared their details with us on each of their podcasts, and would be absolutely happy to talk to anybody who's interested in taking their coaching outside. And I think one of the things that's probably come out even more so in the last year is the fact that coaching now doesn't really have location boundaries in quite the same way as it did before. So even with an outdoor coach, maybe even this time last year, a coachee might look for an outdoor coach somewhere nearby, so somewhere in a nearby location, or within a relatively short driving distance, or somewhere where they could both meet up together. But obviously, with COVID happening and us all being restricted, we are actually taking coaching, outdoor coaching, virtually and over the phone as well. So those boundaries of location aren't necessarily there anymore. And I could be in Scotland and coaching somebody walking in Wales, and we could be taking our conversation outdoors together, but be in different locations. So thinking about it from a coachee's perspective, widen your thoughts as well in terms of the location of your coach. It doesn't have to be somebody nearby. It could be somebody some distance away. And you'd still get that benefit of the outdoor coaching aspect, even with being over the phone or using Zoom chat, Zoom functions like we are on this podcast today. So there's lots of avenues, but it's about, from a coachee's perspective, going out there and contacting people like ourselves, but also something to think about from a coach perspective as well. If you do want to take your coaching conversation outdoors, how are you finding those coachees who might find this the most beneficial? How are you getting yourself known to those kind of coachees? So thinking about, and we will be sharing some hints and tips about that over the coming podcasts as well.
So ultimately, looking ahead to our podcast, which is going to be released every couple of weeks on a Tuesday. And over the last month or so, we've been connecting with coaches and hearing their stories, asking about their experiences. And we've been really interested in getting these case studies, because sometimes being like a fly on the wall in a coaching conversation can be really interesting, just to kind of get that perspective. So we're going to be diving in and asking about the challenges as well. What happens when it, maybe goes wrong? How do you work through that? How do you work around that when you do meet the unexpected? And then also we're going to be diving in as well to the science behind it as well, and really giving you kind of the theories and the names of individuals. And a lot of the research, you can trace it back to the 60s, the 70s and the 80s. It's not new. They're actually, what we're doing in coaching as a profession, I do liken to as a bit of a mongrel at times. We kind of cherry pick different theories from all over the place and then pull them together. So ultimately, what can we learn from theories that have been around for that long, and how can we apply it? Ultimately, it's the application and the best practice and the sharing of ideas is what it is all about. So just to kind of highlight some of the individuals that we've been speaking to, and what's been really interesting is that everybody has their own flavor, their own style, which as a coach you would anyway. But then actually when you place it within the outdoor context, and how you then, partner with nature, invite nature in, co-create nature, whether you're in an urban area, or whether you're by the sea, or whether you're in the Highlands of Scotland, it all gives a really different flavour to the coaching. So we've had some really memorable conversations, and I'm really looking forward to being able to share these with you, and then also hear your feedback, because that's what we're really interested in, starting the conversation. So we want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear what you maybe agree with or what you disagree with, and just, let us know and start the conversation. So just looking ahead to the kind of a taster for the first couple of episodes, just to kind of get you in the mood, Alex, it would be great to know, who have we got in store?
So we have Professor Jonathan Passmore from Henley Business School, who was also my dissertation supervisor, and a wonderful help and wealth of knowledge in not just the areas of coaching, but ecopsychology as well. So he'll be dipping into an overview of ecopsychology, eco-coaching, what the benefits are of being outdoors from a psychological perspective, not just from an actual coaching perspective, but also the psychology that sits behind it as well. So we got some really great insights from Jonathan, both from an academic perspective, but also a practical perspective as well.
And then we're going to dive into the coaching practitioners after Professor Jonathan Passmore has set us up. He's a great champion of this work, and it is great to have his support. We'll then have Karen. She is based in Richmond Park in London. I partnered with her to do a coaching workshop for the International Coach Federation UK chapter conference a couple of years ago. So that was how I connected with her. And she very much comes from a mindfulness background, and she really shares a lot about her backstory as well, and what made her move into this field, into this arena, and how she's found that journey over the last 5 years, and how she's built up her practice.
And then we're going to be talking to Kat Treblico, who is based up here in Scotland, like I am, but she's over on the East Coast in Edinburgh. And she talks a lot about her journey of becoming a coach, and how she had quite a laser view focus of wanting to become an outdoor coach. From almost from day one, and that transition from being in business, working down in south in England, and moving back up to Scotland and creating her coaching business. So there's some really great insights from Kat's podcast around the kind of how to do it, and how to get yourself change that direction if you're not doing that already. And Kat is also another person who's outdoor trained and has some qualifications in being in the great outdoors, and she talks a little bit about the importance of those practical side of things and being prepared as well. So we get some really great insights from Kat.
And then we stay up in Scotland, but move to the other coast, to the west coast, to Glasgow, where we meet Nick Smith. And he has very much a background in the outward bound. And he talks us through a lot of the kind of the practicalities around routes and equipment, and how can you kind of set up and make sure that you are safe working within the outdoor space. So that's just a small insight. We've got loads more individuals kind of lined up waiting to meet you and to share their story. And we're focusing on practitioners at first, and then as we kind of move through the rest of the year, we're going to be speaking to experts in their field, and hopefully we're going to have a few surprise guests along the way who will offer their thoughts around coaching outdoors.
And so just a reminder as well, all of the podcast episodes will be available on our website, which is www.coaching-outdoors.com. And on that website, we'll also be sharing resources as well. So if anybody mentions anything in their podcasts, shares ideas about things that you can read, other things to listen to watch, websites to go to, etc., we'll be sharing all of those resources on our website as well. And just, it's not just about the podcast series. It'll be a place where you can come and look for further information, new ideas. There'll be some blogs along the way, and it'll also be showing our future projects as well that Anna Marie and I will be working on throughout this year and into next year. And it will also be an opportunity for you to provide us feedback as well. Anna Marie mentioned that. So and also to sign up to our mailing list as well, so that we can send you reminders and let you know when each podcast is going to be released on a bi-weekly basis on a Tuesday as well. And the other aspect that we haven't mentioned yet, which we probably should, Anna Marie and I co-wrote a chapter in a book that was published last year called The Coach's Handbook, which is a practical guide, a practitioner's guide for coaches. And we talked about everything we've spoken about today, and some of the topics that are going to come up in the future podcasts as well. So all about understanding the background of outdoor coaching, the research, and the practicalities as well. So we would highly recommend anybody who's interested in having a little look at that as well, just to get a little bit more information, a bit more detail. We even share with you some suggested questions that you might ask your coach whilst you're in a coachee, when you're in an outdoor environment. And as I said, all the references are available on our website.
I can't believe we nearly got to the end without mentioning our book. Wow, well done us, but we got a final plug in. That was great. Yeah, so ultimately, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for our first episode of Coaching Outdoors. Do sign up, do join us when we talk to Jonathan Passmore, and then join us for the rest of the journey. This is all about you, the listener. We are here to support you. Ultimately, if there's anything that you want to hear or talk about, or someone that you think would be a really great guest, let us know. We're really excited about kind of starting this journey and ultimately seeing where it is going to lead. And we're glad that you are along for the ride with us.
Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for me as well. And we look forward to joining you on our podcast series. Thank you.